Hello and welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric, and as it was recommended by many, this is the best thing to do at every national park. I personally have visited 62 of America's 63 wonderful national parks. The one that will not be mentioned on here is National Park of American Samoa. Now, one main disclaimer before I talk about each of these: as you may expect, I have not experienced every single thing to do in any national park. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure no one has. This is going to be my personal favorite thing, and for parks where I feel I have not seen a lot of stuff, I will definitely shout out another one that is absolutely worth going to. That way, you'll have a good idea of what some of the best things to do in each national park are if you're planning a trip. This is going to be part one of a two-part video because 62 parks in one video is quite a bit to handle. So let's jump right in. We're going in alphabetical order, starting with Acadia National Park in Maine. This one for me was definitely going to Cadillac Mountain. There are plenty of nice hikes here, and views are stunning in several places, but for me, nothing can quite compete with the sunset or sunrise at Cadillac Mountain. Overlooking the water, mountains surrounding you, but being so high up, I think it is a breathtaking view and one of the most awe-inspiring in any national park. Next up is Arches National Park in Utah, mainly earning this very high ranking from many. A lot of people put it in their top 5 for Delicate Arch, and personally, I agree that it's one of the best things to do. It is my personal favorite thing in the park, as there are plenty of other great hikes for sure, but nothing is quite as breathtaking as the walk up to the arch and of course the arch itself. It's an iconic photo. Seeing it at sunset is pretty much a must if you're able to, and I highly recommend it. Now, Badlands National Park in South Dakota, this one has a few lesser hikes, not as many major trails overall, but Notch Trail is the best of them. The thing about Notch is that it's kind of not really a marked trail, and you have to climb up the Badlands so you can kind of explore a bit more than you can in other parks. A very unique experience for sure, and one I highly recommend. Now we have Big Bend National Park in Texas. In my opinion, the most underrated of all national parks, and it has one of the absolute best trails in the nation: Lost Mine. Lost Mine Trail at sunrise is otherworldly. The mountains have such a unique and jagged sort of feature to them that few desert mountains have. And it's honestly one of the most defined and detailed areas of nature, period. The abundance of wildlife on the trails is also worth noting, and it's not a very crowded trail at all. So it's definitely one of my favorites. Now for Biscayne National Park in Florida. The first where I may not have done the best thing to do here. I enjoyed paddling. That was my personal favorite thing I did. I got to see a manatee and enjoy some of the South Florida scenery. However, I highly recommend you do snorkeling if you go here. Snorkeling is the main reason a lot of people go, and most of the park is underwater. So getting to see the coral reefs, sometimes seeing turtles, barracudas, sharks, and a whole lot more, it's definitely a very nice thing to do. Now Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park in Colorado. This one, it's hard to choose because there's not really a ton of major things that are different from each other. All of the sort of overlooks and viewpoints of the canyon have similar yet drastically different perspectives of the canyon, so my recommendation is just hit as many viewpoints and hikes as you can in the South Rim, if that's the rim you choose to go to, but the North Rim is definitely worth going to as well. I recommend trying to hit both, and East Portal Road is also a very nice one if you want to go to the bottom of the canyon without doing the hike. But basically, see as much as you can at this park. There's a lot of different perspectives and a lot to enjoy. Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah is another one where going into the canyon is very worth doing. I enjoy the overlooks, but my favorite thing here is Queen's Garden and the similar trails into the canyon. I feel that being beneath the hoodoos and the rocky spires is such a fascinating experience, and it is actually one of my favorite hikes I've ever done. Now for another Utah park, Canyonlands. Canyonlands National Park has Island in the Sky, known for Mesa Arch, and that's everyone's favorite thing to do here. But I highly recommend you go to the Needles. The Needles is far superior in my opinion in terms of beauty, and Chesler Park is one of the best hikes ever. It has absolutely massive rocky spires. They're wide, colorful, abundant, and I think there are few places quite like it. So I think if you are going to Moab, you gotta make some time for the Needles area of Canyonlands. Four-wheel drive is also a great thing to do here, but the Needles area is personally my favorite part of the park. Capitol Reef National Park comes next, and this one I spent very little time in. Sunset Point was my favorite thing I did, but the actual best is probably Cathedral Valley. This one is best if you have four-wheel drive, but it will give you views of absolutely tremendous monoliths. Some of the best desert scenery you'll ever see. Now for Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. This one is mainly known for, as you may guess from the name, caverns. And the one thing that stands out is the self-guided big room hike. You don't need a tour guide, you just go in and get to walk on your own at your own pace, exploring the stalactites and stalagmites making up one of the most impressive caves in the entire world. The next park is Channel Islands in California. A very unique island park. Santa Cruz Island is absolutely the best island in my opinion for hiking, and Potato Harbor is probably the best hike of them all. I like a lot of them. Smuggler's Cove, Del Norte, there's a lot. But Potato Harbor has the best beach view, and you'll most likely see Channel Islands foxes, and even see dolphins and whales from above at some points. Congaree National Park is the next one, and this South Carolina park is not one a lot of people talk about, but I think the best thing to do here is the Boardwalk Trail. Paddling's also worthwhile, but the best hike is definitely Boardwalk. You're kind of above the trees to an extent, but you're also beneath the very tops of them, so it's a very nice forest hike, and you're very likely to see a lot of wildlife. Now Crater Lake National Park in Oregon. The lake is one of the most beautiful sights in any national park, and I think one of the best views of it is Watchman Overlook. The Watchman view is possibly the most iconic, and while there's other great views like Garfield Peak and Mount Scott, I think it's hard to beat Watchman. Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Ohio is the next one, and this one's scenery is very diverse. You have waterfalls, you have some unique rock formations, but for me Brandywine Falls is the best thing to do. It's a very nice one, fairly large in size, has a lot of different sort of rocky steps as it goes down, and it's a very nice short hike. Death Valley National Park in California is one of the most diverse though. Far more diverse than Cuyahoga Valley, and more diverse than pretty much every park I've named so far, as weird as that may sound. But Zabriskie Point is my favorite view here. I love the Mesquite Flat sand dunes, I love Badwater Basin, I love Artist Drive, but Zabriskie Point has absolutely otherworldly, almost Martian rock formations, and you overlook a different salt flat. And it's one of my favorite views I've ever seen in any desert national park. The next one's a very tough one to choose. Denali National Park in Alaska. Any view of the mountain on a clear day is the best. When you're going along the Denali Park Road, which has to be accessed via bus or bike, unfortunately, so you can't drive your car, but it's absolutely worth it to get a view of the mountain. Personally, I think Wonder Lake and Thoroughfare Ridge are the best places to see it. Thoroughfare Ridge is a short but steep hike, and Wonder Lake has a very nice campground. So I recommend going to one of these places. Dry Tortugas National Park in Florida is also one that was kind of tough to choose, because there's one great activity on land and one great activity on water. In the water, snorkeling at the coaling docks will give you views of the most unique and colorful coral I've seen pretty much anywhere. But on the land, you can do the self-guided walk of Fort Jefferson, which is definitely one of the best historic sites in any national park. Staying in Florida, we have Everglades National Park, and Shark Valley Road is the best place to see the Everglades wildlife. From wading birds to alligators, there's a lot to enjoy. You have to take a tram or bike, but it's definitely one of my favorites. And I do like the wildlife here quite a bit, and it kind of is close to home for me, but this is definitely one of the more exotic parts of Everglades National Park. Going to a very different part of the country, Gates of the Arctic National Park in Alaska. This one I can't choose. There's not really major named sites or hikes to do here. You just have to go in the backcountry and enjoy nights in the mountains. It's probably one of the best experiences you can ever have in the wilderness, pretty much untouched, and I highly recommend this is what you do if you go to Gates of the Arctic. Now going to a very different one, Gateway Arch National Park. This one, not quite sure why the Arch earned park status, but I don't think the Arch is the best thing to do here. you'll definitely want to spend more time in the museum at Gateway Arch. It gives a very fascinating look at American history, and it's quite fun. I think it's not really a huge national park worthy kind of thing, and there are some visitor centers that are better, but for what it is the best thing at the park. Now for Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska, the boat tour to Marjorie Glacier, getting to see that glacier calve and seeing wildlife along the way, is the best experience you can have here, at least from what I know. Glacier National Park is one of the best national parks for sure, and I think part of that is Highline Trail. An absolute must for hikers if you go to this park. There's other great hikes, you have Avalanche Lake and Grinnell Glacier and Iceberg Lake and all that, but Highline Trail is just something else. You're on a ridge often, looking up to the mountains, even looking down on the mountains, and the Grinnell Glacier overlook is one of the best views in any national park. You're also quite likely to see wildlife along the way, and it's simply a wonderful hike. Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona is possibly the most famous national park of them all, and this one, I have one thing you definitely should not limit your trip to, and that is the Rim. The Rim is beautiful, but I feel an inner canyon hike is an absolute must. Bright Angel Trail is personally the one I've done, but I personally feel from my experience, you just have not experienced the Grand Canyon to its fullest if you go just to the Rim and don't do an inner canyon hike. There's something special about walking into the canyon. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's definitely a must-do in the park. Now for another grand park, Grand Teton in Wyoming. This one has a lot of great hikes, but I personally recommend the Snake River float trip. It's not rapids, but being along the river, getting to see some wildlife, and some of the best views of the mountains, that's an unforgettable experience. And I highly recommend you do that, possibly prioritizing that over every hike in the park. Now for Great Basin in Nevada. This one is underrated, and there's a few things I have not done there that I highly recommend, those being Wheeler Peak and the Lehman Caves, but I personally done the Bristlecone Glacier Trail, and that one's wonderful. You have the extraordinary glacier in Nevada, the only one of its kind, and the oldest trees in the world in Bristlecone Pines. Definitely special, and definitely awesome. Now for Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado. High Dune Trail is my favorite. I'm sure Star Dune is also excellent, but High Dune gives you a wonderful view of some of the untouched dunes in the park with a wonderful mountain backdrop and spectacular views overall. And it's a very unique type of hike because you're climbing through sand, so I think it's one of the best I've done. The final great park is Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee and North Carolina. I've not done much here. The best I've done is Klingman's Dome, but from what I've heard, Alum Cave and Cades Cove are the best things to do. Alum Cave is a hike, and Cades Cove is a very nice area to drive through and to see wildlife. Guadalupe Mountains in Texas is one where, very easily in my opinion, Guadalupe Peak seems to be the best thing to do. A strenuous hike for sure, but getting to the highest point in Texas is quite rewarding. On to Hawaii. First we have Haleakala National Park, and the Haleakala Summit is definitely the more beautiful of the main areas in my opinion. You have a very vibrant and colorful peak, the very highest point in all of Maui. You can sometimes see other islands, and I think it's just a very unique one. There's not a whole lot of other places like it, and it does feel like another planet to an extent. The other Hawaii park is Hawaii Volcanoes. For me, Kilauea Caldera is the best I saw. The crater has a lot of quirky geothermal features, and that's something I love. And I highly recommend you do that. But it's also good to try to go when there's lava, and you are very likely to see that at the Kilauea volcano. Definitely one of the most magnificent experiences, and there's two things quite as magnificent as lava flow. And the final one for this part is Hot Springs National Park in Arkansas. One that few think about, and one that a lot of people hate on. But there's much more than just the town of Hot Springs. As a matter of fact, Balanced Rock Trail is quite beautiful. You can see the Washita Mountains, and the Balanced Rock itself is pretty interesting. You're in the far backcountry of the park for this one, there's some wildlife, and it's a nice trail overall. If you go to Hot Springs, I think this trail is the way to make the most of your time. Thank you for watching part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. It will hopefully be out in about a week. Subscribe so you know when it comes out though. I'll see you next time.